Most solo consultants don't plateau because they lack skill. They plateau because their business model stops scaling. At around 10 to 30K a month, most consultants run into one of three structural bottlenecks: capacity, pipeline, positioning. And unless the structure changes, growth becomes increasingly difficult no matter how hard they work. So in this video, I want to break down why this plateau happens, what the actual bottlenecks are, and what needs to change to grow beyond it sustainably. The capacity bottleneck. This is the most common one. Most consultants build a business where revenue scales directly with delivery hours, which means more revenue requires either more clients, more work, or more complexity. And eventually that breaks. For example, if your service takes 10 to 15 hours per client and you need 5 to 6 clients per month to hit your revenue target, you quickly run out of capacity once you account for fulfillment, calls, admin, sales, revisions, and client communication. The business becomes operationally heavy before it becomes scalable, and this gets worse when the service is heavily customized. A lot of consultants operate without a repeatable delivery system, so every client requires a different process, different solutions, and different workflows. That creates a fulfillment bottleneck where the business depends entirely on the founder's time and attention. At that point, growth becomes fragile, because the moment demand increases, operations become unstable. The second bottleneck is acquisition. A lot of consultants rely on referrals, inconsistent outreach, or occasional content, which means the pipeline is unpredictable. And unpredictability creates instability. Because even if your service is good, inconsistent lead flow makes revenue difficult to scale intentionally. Most consultants also underestimate the math involved in client acquisition. For example, if you close 25% of sales calls and 40% of leads book calls, you may need 8 sales calls and 20 plus qualified leads just to land 2 clients. Without a repeatable acquisition system, growth becomes reactive instead of structured. This is why scalable consulting businesses usually build systems around content, outbound, partnerships, lead generation, or audience building, instead of relying entirely on referrals. The third bottleneck is positioning. A lot of consultants position themselves too broadly, and broad positioning usually creates weaker differentiation, lower pricing power, more competition, and lower perceived value. When the market doesn't clearly understand who you help, what specific problem you solve, and why your approach is different, pricing becomes difficult, which usually forces consultants into lower ticket work, excessive customization, and taking on too many clients. Specializing changes that. Clear positioning increases trust, perceived expertise, and pricing power. And higher pricing changes the entire revenue model, because if you can generate the same revenue from fewer clients, the business becomes simpler, more scalable, and less operationally overloaded. So how do you break the plateau? Most consultants try to grow by working harder, but usually the problem is structural. It's not about motivation or more effort. The business model itself has to change. There are 3 major shifts that typically solve this plateau. You productize the service. This doesn't necessarily mean turning your business into a course or SaaS product. It means creating a more repeatable delivery model. The more standardized the process becomes, the easier fulfillment becomes, the easier delegation becomes, and the less revenue depends entirely on your personal time. Productization reduces operational complexity. You increase pricing through better positioning. Higher pricing is not just about charging more randomly. It's usually the result of stronger positioning, clearer specialization, better outcomes, and higher perceived value. When positioning improves, you can generate more revenue with fewer clients. That changes the economics of the business completely. You build systems around acquisition and delivery. Growth becomes much more stable when lead generation, sales, onboarding, fulfillment, and client management operate through systems instead of improvisation. Otherwise, the business stays dependent on constant manual effort, and eventually that becomes the ceiling. A lot of consultants think they fit an income ceiling when really they fit a structural ceiling. The issue usually isn't effort, motivation, or even skill. It's that the underlying business model no longer scales efficiently. And once you identify the actual bottleneck, growth becomes much easier to approach strategically. To help with this, I built a free Revenue OS starter kit. It includes a revenue planner, a structural constraint framework, and an example revenue model to help you identify what's limiting growth in your business. You can download it through the link in the description below. And if this video was helpful, subscribe for more content on building scalable service businesses and revenue systems.